Doctor may be against banter, but I'm not. Robots of Sherwood. I was looking forward to going back to this one. Now, here's the thing. Let me be upfront. I really enjoy this episode. But I also know that a lot of folks don't. And I can't even argue that they're wrong. Liking an episode like this really does come down to a matter of personal taste, much more so than I think usually happens with Doctor Who. Because, not to treat the fandom like a homogenous single unit that all thinks the same way, but we all enjoy Doctor Who, and most of us tend to enjoy similar things about it. So there are certain things that you can do that are usually going to please most of the fandom, and certain things you can do that are usually going to tick off most of the fandom. But there are some things that don't normally come up in the course of Doctor Who that then become the thing that people either like or they don't, and that aren't normally part of this mix. In this case, the tone on this, that light, cheeky, preposterous kind of adventure, and the ridiculousness of a character like Robin, as he is portrayed here, which is very camp and very over the top. This was the sort of thing that you can find every now and then in classic Who. It didn't really come up in New Who. Not in anything that, worked. I mean, one could argue that Love and Monsters is a bit camp, but I think the problems with that episode go a lot further than not liking a camp aspect. So, for me, I really enjoy this episode. And I enjoy it for basically the same reason that I really like the show Legends of Tomorrow. It's just so much fun. And I also like the decision to do Robin Hood basically taking advantage of the fact that that frees them up. Because for the most part, when Doctor Who has tackled real-life historical figures, it's usually tried to do them some degree of justice. Part of that owing to the fact that more often than not, they are aggrandizing these historical figures, which honestly can be its own minefield, but that's a discussion I don't really feel like having right now. But by picking a legend, something that everyone has heard of but probably didn't really exist, you can just play and just have fun with all the tropes and the iconography of the character and not worry about, well, the real Robin Hood wasn't like that, because there probably wasn't a real Robin Hood in the first place. So getting to just play with that and not have to worry about the accuracy of it, not have to worry about, are we over-aggrandizing or are we bringing down this character, like anything like that. Not that I'm convinced Doctor Who actually spends a lot of time thinking about that, but I think there's at least somewhere in the mix, because no historical figure has been as over the top as Robin Hood is. So it really does feel like kind of the reins came off, the leash got loosened, and they really got to just go nuts. And I love the guy they got to play Robin Hood. He is so much fun, and he is clearly having a blast, but also they do enough little touches so that his portrayal does still feel human, as exaggerated as it is. And the smart thing that was done, because what wouldn't have worked is if he was very boisterous all the way through and then he tried to have a more somber moments just at the end. But early on, when Marion is first meeting all the rest of these people and all the merry men, and she says, you're sad. He's like, why do you say that? Because the doctor's right. You laugh too much. And he has a little vulnerable moment. So it's seeding early on that the bravado is to a certain extent an act, because the guy's been through a lot and it's not all been good. So I do really enjoy that getting seeded in there early as well. The sheriff, he's fine. He's workable as a sheriff. He just needs to be dastardly and self-serving, and yeah, he does that. It works. I also rather like that it's established that the Doctor won the archery tournament by cheating. Not so much that I like the idea of the Doctor cheating in and of itself, although totally works for me. But it means that the Doctor just didn't also happen to be a massively skilled archer. There's needs to be a limit on how many things the Doctor's really good at. And so I like that turned out to be the case there. Oh, one total nitpick on the archery tournament, though. And look, I have a longbow. I do archery. Or when I can. I don't have my own range to be able to do it at. But I've always enjoyed archery, and it just drives me crazy at the archery tournament, especially when they move the target further away, that they're aiming level, basically parallel to the ground. Arrows aren't bullets. They don't fly. I mean, bullets have drop off if you go far enough, but for how far away that target was, they needed to be angled up at least about there, and they're just firing dead at it. I'm like, no, that's going to go in the dirt about 10 feet short of the target. And that just annoys me. But that's one of those things where I'm burdened by knowledge. I know just a little bit too much about archery to realize that that's not how that works. So, minor nitpick there. As far as the overall thing goes, here's the thing I like. I like that none of the major players involved in this are actually aliens, because again, another bit of a recurring thing for me is the fact that Doctor Who has a tendency to go, ooh, what's this thing? And it's like it's a monster, or it's this historical thing, or this mythological thing. It's like, it's aliens. I like here that even though they tease out the possibility, neither the sheriff nor Robin Hood nor any of his merry men, none of them are aliens. None of them don't belong here. The only things that don't belong are just these knights, generic looking knights. So I like that they didn't try and pull the similar sort of, oh, it's this thing that you've heard of, but it's actually aliens, which is never surprising at this point because it's what they do every dang time. Another thing that I really like, I mentioned in my little intro joke, liking the banter. I love the banter. So here's the thing. If the performance of Robin Hood was not delivered the way it was, and if his banter and frustration chemistry with the Doctor was not as good as it is, this could have been a very flat episode. It really does ride on the overall tone and the strength of personality. And if either of those things aren't to your liking, yeah, this isn't going to work for you. But since I enjoy both of those in this case, although I should be clear, I don't feel like the tone of this thing should ever be what Doctor Who is normally. I like it as a sort of a breather, a little breath of fresh air, and a different take and a different vibe to things. So that's part of why I like this so much. I would never want it to become the standard for Doctor Who, but as an occasional, yeah, I like it. But what I was getting at was with the banter, and especially with the Doctor complaining about the banter, I really like here that they do a very good job of justifying how grouchy Capaldi's Doctor is. Because I haven't rewatched Series 8 in a while. But my general memory, thinking back on Series 8, 9, 10, was that he started very grouchy, got basically maybe swung a little bit too far in the other direction, trying to, be cool and get people to like him, and then sort of settling in a nice happy medium in 10. That's part of his character arc that I really enjoy across the series. But it is nice to come back to Series 8 and see an episode like this where, yes, he's grouchy and he's kind of been established as a bit of a grouchy character, but I totally get it. This Robin Hood has the exact kind of personality that is going to irritate the heck out of this particular Doctor. And it makes his grouchiness fully justified. Whereas, again, we'll see how my memory holds up. To my memory, there are some instances later on where it doesn't feel as justified. And actually, I even brought it up in the previous review for Into the Dalek, where it didn't feel fully justified with him having the issues with the soldier. It just felt a little, arbitrary is a little too strong a word, but it just felt like forced grouchiness, forced issues for him to have. So I like that if they're going to have him be this sort of crotchety, that they find ways to organically bring it out of him through the situation and the people he has to interact with, rather than just having it be a default setting for his personality. So I enjoy that quite a bit. Clara's working this. You know what's something I really like about this? It's funny because I'd forgotten that it happens at all. And if you're not paying attention, it could just read as like a lame joke. But it's actually very telling. So there's this scene, this is after the archery tournament, where Robin, the Doctor, and Clara All three of them are in this cell. They're all chained up. So what happens is the guard comes in and says he's going to take the leader, and Robin and the doctor start arguing over which one of them it is, and he takes Clara. Now, that feels like just a joke in and of itself, but the thing is, if you realize that that guard had been outside the door and been listening to them for a little while to figure out who he was going to take, this makes total sense. Because these two are arguing, and this one is the one who says, "Shut up, you, say your plan." "Oh, okay, now you, say your plan." So it actually feeds off of that, and that works quite well. And also, what I like about that moment and that interaction is it really plays into Clara's new position as a teacher. If you've ever known a teacher, someone who has to deal with kids who don't always get along, and be like, "Okay, stop. This, let's sort this." And that's the tone that she basically adopts right then. So I totally buy it now that they've established that she is teaching at a school. So this really is, in many ways, Clara feels like a brand new character in Series 8. And I don't mean that in a way that they completely altered her and like rewrote her from the ground up. I mean there's foundational justification for why she is the way she is that it really felt like Series 7 didn't bother to do because it was too busy going, "Ooh, isn't she mysterious?" And somehow they felt lacking details on her was going to add to the mystery. But now that that's all behind us, we get to watch how being a teacher influences the way she deals with someone like the doctor, and she just gets that authoritative tone that teachers dealing with rowdy kids will get. And so I actually really liked that moment. So here's the thing. I have a tendency to groan about Clara in general. I groan about her because of how she starts and how she ends. But I've said before, and this is holding up, that she did grow on me in her time with Capaldi. I don't like the entire mystery of the Impossible Girl, aside from the fact that I think it's kind of a lame series, second half of a series arc in the first place. In addition to that, she just feels completely undercharacterized, especially versus the two iterations we'd met for only an episode apiece previous to that. And I also, we'll get there, have a lot of issues with Hellbent. So I have this trajectory with Clara where she starts low, gets better, actually gets quite good, and then nosedives at the very end. And a lot of that is not, again, I want to stress, it's not Jenna Coleman, it's not the performance, it is character use and writing, primarily. So it is nice to go back and watch Series 8 again and remember, yeah, she did grow on me. She was working better for me at this point as these things go, and these sort of interactions are a big part of why. And she and Capaldi just have great chemistry. Just little things like him prompting her to make the decision of where they go and then be like, "No, we're not going to do that," and trying to talk her into something else, but she just puts her foot down on it. It's just the right amount of adversarial. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention, I really like the moment towards the end with Robin and the doctor, where, Robin says, "So I'll just be thought of as a legend." Well, good. History's a burden. And, I'm not a hero, but maybe I can inspire other people to try and be. And he relates that to the doctor, because the doctor has been asking, am I a good man? He's questioning his own value as a hero, as a good person. And Robin Hood is laying out, you don't have to be perfect, but you can still be inspiring regardless. And there's value in that. And it was nice to see that sort of sink in for Capaldi to hear it. Oh, one other minor thing. I'm going to try and keep an eye on this to see if they address it, but it's bugging me right now that so far the whole Promised Land and Heaven thing, which ties into Missy, so got introduced in Deep Breath. It gets reiterated here because that's where the robots are trying to get to, is the Promised Land. Why robots? In my memory of the plan and everything else for how Death in Heaven worked was that she needed the minds of people who had been alive. So I'm going to have to keep an ear out to see if we get an explanation as to why she would have been interacting at all with robots and planting the idea of promised lands into robots. And you know, clockwork cyborg kind of things in the case of Deep Breath. I mean, Deep Breath, I was prepared to let go because that one actually plants the idea that, you know, he had replaced so many parts with so many different people that he just kind of through osmosis, I guess, kind of absorbed the idea and some of the concepts that underlie the majority of humanity, like the idea of a promised land. And while that's a very soft science explanation, it was enough for me to let it go in that case. But now we've got robots, straight up robots. These are robots with a mechanical ship trying to get to the promised land. What? And even if there is, like, you're going to argue with, like, well, the aliens, and maybe the aliens died in the crash, and it's just their automated stuff that's trying to get there, and it was the aliens' goal to get to the promised land. We also see no aliens involved in Death in Heaven. It's all about humans. So I gotta see if I can remember to keep an eye on that, because I'm starting to feel like it doesn't track the way that they try and reiterate that mystery box. We'll see. I think that'll about wrap it up for me. Robots of Sherwood. Have you rewatched it lately? What are your thoughts on it? I really do enjoy it. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Oh, and if you do enjoy it, have you seen Legends of Tomorrow? Because if not, do that. Power through the first season. It's got 2 really lousy characters who are gone after the first season. After that, it's gold. So, usual stuff. You know what it is. Like and subscribe and Patreon and socials, etc., etc., etc. Links in the description. All that stuff. So, that's it for this time. And you don't have to do any of the stuff I mentioned if you don't want to, because, end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.